Hey, Rhonda.
Hey, hey,
Hello,
Melissa.
hello. I know. So real quick, this is Rhonda Anderson. She is the president and CEO of the YMCA of Greensboro in Greensboro, North Carolina. And two things, I'm going to share two things I admire about Rhonda, and then I'm really going to let her introduce herself and share her story, is how she shows up as a servant leader and her authenticity. And so I think that you will hear that ethos exuded from her in this interview today. So Rhonda, if you would, so first, thank you. Let me start with that. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah.
Um, Tell us how your faith story begins. Let's do that.
Yes, thank you. And it's great being here with everyone this afternoon. I'm so appreciative of this opportunity. I'm humbled by it, actually. And so thank you to Melissa and the team for inviting me to share my story. And, whatever I share, I pray that it's a blessing to someone and someone listening, and it'll be an encouragement to you. My faith story starts when I was a little girl growing up in Columbia, South Carolina, which is where I was born. And I had a praying grandmother. My mom had me at a very young age. She was 21 years old. And so my grandmother was the one who really instilled in me my spiritual foundation and belief in Christ. You probably heard the stories from other people at the age of 3, 4, 5, kneeling down with her on the side of the bed and teaching them now lay down to sleep. And that was the first prayer that I learned. And then from there, I think probably around 7 or 8 when she taught me the Lord's Prayer. And so that was really the beginning of my journey into, becoming a woman of Christ. And that, just, like a lot of folks had to go to Sunday school every Sunday, vacation Bible school in the summertime. And that stayed with me. And, I would probably say I became probably more aware of my responsibility of what it meant to be a Christian when I became an adult, because at 12 I was baptized, and I did that because that was what I was told to do. You're gonna get baptized. And so at that time, I didn't really understand it, but I knew that my grandmother thought it was important. And so, that was the beginning journey for me, just learning the importance of prayer, and that there was a power beyond, what we could see and experience here. And that was the beginning for me.
Wonderful. So tell us your background too, right? So you worked for a Fortune 500 company before eventually landing in the YMCA. So tell us that journey and that path.
Sure. I'll start with maybe just a little bit before that. I said I was born in Columbia, South Carolina, but my family moved to Brooklyn, New York when I was in 3rd grade. So that was quite a shocking transition. Always excelled in school, in sports, and had the blessing of going on to Cornell University and played basketball there, and Penn State grad school. And then after grad school, had the opportunity to work for a company that is now, no longer in existence, GTE, in a management training program for about a year and a half. Learned that I really didn't like telecommunications all that much, and then moved to Washington, D.C. to work for a small company that focused on sports and introducing kids to sports. That didn't work out. So moved back north, actually, and moved back to Brooklyn. And after about 6 months, got a job with Johnson & Johnson. At that point, I will say that God opened the door, because when I look over my journey in terms of my career, it was God that opened so many doors for me. And even at the time when I wasn't truly, living a life that was fully committed to him, he was still gracious to me and opened doors of opportunity. And so Johnson & Johnson was where I really started, I would say, my professional career. They are well known for how they train their employees, and I got a lot of great training and advanced through the organization. And almost after about 10 years, they divested of the company that I was with. And so I moved on to work for another Fortune 500 company, Simon & Schuster publishing company. So had a really, really great background from the corporate arena in terms of training and development and marketing and those types of things. And after, a few years in the corporate arena, I started to get a little restless. I just felt that there was just something more. I mean, I had great jobs I was making great money but just didn't feel fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I was very active in my church on various committees. And at the time, I was working to look at a feasibility study to open a credit union for my church. And I got a call from the executive pastor wanting to meet with me because I thought she wanted to hear an update on how things were going with the credit union. So met with her. And at the time she asked if I would consider coming to work for the church. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I'm great with J&J. I'm finally reached executive level compensation. I can get stock options and all these great things. And just something inside me, I started to feel a little bit of a conviction probably from the Holy Spirit. And it took me about 6 months, and I prayed and I'm like, Lord, is this really what you want me to do? Because it would come at great financial sacrifice, and I didn't, I wasn't at that point ready to do that, but it was the prompting of the Holy Spirit, I believe, that where I just prayed for about 6 months straight. And finally, I felt this peace to say, this is what you're supposed to do. And I left the corporate world behind. And, I left the corporate world behind and worked for my church as the chief operating officer. It was a church that had grown from like 250 members to 5,000 members in a very short time. So they needed someone to come in and help with the administrative function of the church. And I left a lot of money on the table, but when I look back on that, I know that it was God's will for me to do that. And he has more than provided, for me, even with that. And I think my obedience actually led to the door opening for me almost 8-9 years later, after I finished working for the church, to start at the Y.
Mm-hmm.
I am one of those folks who did not start at the Y as a swim instructor or a program director and work my way up. I came in, at a time where I was at midpoint of my career. And I do believe still to this day that it was because of my obedience of leaving that corporate job, going to do what God called me to do,
Mm-hmm.
to work for the church and to help the church with all the skills that I learned in the corporate world. My obedience to that opened a door for me to come into the YMCA.
Mm-hmm.
And so in August of 2012, I started to work for the Community YMCA, which is now the YMCA of Greater Monmouth County, as its CEO. And it was a blessing to do that. And typically, someone like myself, certainly a minority female, having that opportunity, they're not easily accessible in a lot of ways. And so I know that it was because of God's grace and my ability to do what he called for me to do, that he opened that door for me to start with the YMCA.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that was just one part of that was kind of your entry into the YMCA. And then, so then tell us about, because obedience is this theme, right? Because then you were in Charlotte and now you're in Greensboro. So tell us how tell us about that.
So when I started with the now YMCA of Greater Monmouth County, it was a Y, mid-major Y, for those of you who are familiar with those terms. And it was in some pretty serious financial challenges. So I made a commitment when I went there to the board that I would, but me working with our team, that we would work to get that YMCA into fiscal soundness. And it took 5 years. It was very difficult, a lot of hard work, a lot of difficult decisions that had to be made, all through prayer, and all through just trying to hear God's voice in terms of what we needed to do to bring that organization to a healthier place. And after about 5 years, we got there. And so I felt at that point, after I got a call about the opportunity in Charlotte, that I did what I promised the board to do, and that was to leave the Y in a better place than when I got there. And they were in a really good position when I left, and have since grown and merged with another Y and really doing well under Lori's leadership. And so I had the opportunity to transition to Charlotte to serve as a COO in Charlotte for about 2.5 years. And one of the driving forces behind me leaving Jersey, and because I could have really stayed there and been very happy, was my mom. My mom is in Columbia, South Carolina, and she was aging, and I knew that I needed to be closer to her. And as God would have it, 2 years ago to this day, she suffered a stroke. And so had I still been in Jersey, now I probably would have had to relocate because my sister and I are providing care for her. And so I look at God's hand in that even. And I met some really, really great people in Charlotte. I see a couple of them on this call. And it was a blessing from that perspective, in terms of the people that I had an opportunity to meet, and even some of the people that I had an opportunity to bring to Charlotte, Victor Nicholson being one of those folks. And I feel that was probably part of my calling for being there. I always say that there's always a reason for everything. And there were some challenges there, but even through all those challenges, God's hand was on me, and he saw me through and then opened the door for me to come to Greensboro as a CEO in Greensboro, which is a wonderful YMCA. We have some really great people here. We're well respected, as most YMCAs are in the community. And so again, God's hand was on me for this, because as I went through the interview process, I think one of the most unique things that happened with that is that, with interviews, you typically go through rounds and rounds of interviews, particularly for the CEO role. And after I met with the search committee, there was supposed to be a selection of 2 finalists. And as God would have it, they didn't even go to the next round. They offered me the position after that. And so I just see this is where, he had me to be, for this next chapter in this season. And I started in January of 2020. And of course, the pandemic hit, a couple months after that. So that is not a way that you want to necessarily transition into a new community. But still, through it all, we're coming back, and I'm making, some great connections and some great friends here. And we have a really great team here, and I'm blessed to be here. And so, as I look through all of a lot of these places that I've been, there were challenges. And so please don't, though I don't want anyone to believe that everything was, hunky-dory and it was easy. And there were a lot of nights that I was on my knees crying out to God saying, you got to help me out here. What's going on? This is a little bit more than I expected. And he always did. Even in the midst of the storm, he was there. And so I just, people sometimes ask me, well, how did you get to where you're at? And my answer is always hard work certainly is one, but also my trust in the Lord. And I have no shame in saying that, because I know that it's because of his grace that I'm able to be where I'm at. And there's a scripture, I think in Revelations, that said that the door that God opens, no man can shut. And so when something is for you, it is for you. And when he opens that door, no man can shut it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. When you think about your role and your work with the Y and leading it, what are ways that you live out your Christian faith publicly?
Well, I think, for me, it's always in the action. And so it's not so much what we say, it's what we do, and people will see that. And so, we can proclaim to be Christians, but if our actions don't match that proclamation, then we become hypocrites in people's eyes. And so I really try to live out my faith in everything that I do, living by that golden rule of doing unto others as you would have them to do unto you. And I truly believe in that. I believe in, walking in integrity and really just trying to love as Christ would love. And so that sometimes takes patience, that takes, trusting folks, but also there's an accountability as well, because you see so often Christ called people to account. There was no condemnation when he had conversations with folks, but there was always accountability. And so I try to model those types of behaviors and certainly live by the values that, we have in the Y, and caring, honesty, respect, and responsibility. And so I think, again, it's trying to be a witness, and we are witnesses through our actions. And, so someone can say one thing and their actions could be completely different. And that's what people are going to look at. So I really try to live out my beliefs.
Yeah, I love that. In one of our conversations, Rhonda, you said delay is not denial.
Yes.
And
yeah. And I'll go back to that. I gotta give the example of why I said that to you. When I started on the journey of trying to transition to the YMCA, I interviewed for a position with the YMCA. I won't name that Y, in Jersey. And I just didn't feel that it was the right situation for me. And then I interviewed for the position at the Y that I ended up at, but I didn't get that job. I initially interviewed for the COO role at that particular YMCA. I did not get it. And a year later, I got a call from the board chair saying, "Hey, are you still interested in the Y?" And I'm like, okay, so what happened to that COO that y'all hired? And as it turned out, he was like, "No, it's for the CEO's role." And I was like, absolutely. When I looked at the values of the Y. And so I said that to say, I was very disappointed that I did not get that position at the time, because I felt I could have done a great job there. But a year later, the board chair remembered me and he called back. And so that's what I meant when I said delay is not denial, because it was in God's plan for me to transition to the Y, and it didn't happen at that particular time. But because I just kept it moving and said, "Lord, I'm going to trust you." He opened the door. And I would really encourage folks here that there may be something that you are longing for, whether it's another position in the Y or whatever it may be. And if it doesn't happen at the time that you want it to happen, and you're trusting God, know that he can see down the road. So he knows what's coming, and he may say no at that point in time, but it doesn't mean that he won't say yes down the road. So I just say, continue to trust him and be faithful.
Yeah, because it could be just a not yet.
Not yet. Right? That's right. Yes.
Yeah. And so just a minute ago, you also said, it's in the action, right? It's not always, it's the words and the action, they actually need to be aligned, so to speak.
That's right.
And one of the ways in which you took action, and I've loved leaning into it, is this 846 series.
Yes.
And so I don't know if people on the call know about this. And so I would love for you to share about the series, because I think that was where God put on your heart a call to action.
Yes. So the 846 series is a initiative that we started back in August of 2020. It was during the summer of unrest after George Floyd's murder. And it was myself, along with some of my teammates here in Greensboro, as well as a partner that we have, NCCJ of the Piedmont Triad here in Greensboro. And we just felt that there is something that we have to do. We just can't sit by idly. We can't be silent. We are called to be our brother's keepers. And we just felt that there was something that we needed to do in order to bring about some healing in our community, And
Mhm.
so we started talking, what is it that we can do? And a couple of us had gone through the groundwater approach, which is a webinar that, or not a webinar, it's a seminar actually, that provides some really great information on the issue of systemic racism. Because we know that the reason behind George Floyd's murder had to do with racism. And so we thought, let's create an opportunity to educate our community on the issue of systemic racism. And we wanted to do it for as many folks as possible. We focused primarily on this community, but we wanted to open it up to anyone that wanted to participate. And so we came up with 846, which actually speaks to the 8 minutes and 46 seconds in which the officer was on Mr. Floyd's neck. We know it was now 9 minutes or so, but we kept that. And so it was a way of commemorating that and also creating dialogue. And so we know that without the opportunity to learn and to have conversation, that we won't get to any level of healing. And so thankfully we were able to get some local sponsors. And our goal was initially to train or to educate 900 folks around the issue of systemic racism and provide them with the education they needed to understand that this is real, and there are people that are impacted by this daily. So we got the sponsorships. We were able to offer 5 groundwater webinars. And what we found, because we did surveys after that, we found that people wanted more. Because one thing that for those that have gone through groundwater, you get really kind of this data dump. And you're like, okay, so now what can we do? And so for us, this was just part, and for me, certainly was part of I feel my calling to say that we're here to help to bring healing and hope and love into our communities. And so we felt this was a way to do that. And so based on the feedback that we got from those who participated in the groundwater, we did another series. Now we've done 9 different webinars on various topics that people wanted to hear more about. I mean, from operationalizing, equity within our organizations to unconscious bias. We had a youth panel. We had actually a local Caucasian brother who wrote a book about his journey. And so it was called A Story of Race and how we got to where we are. And so all that content is on our website still. And we just, again, felt it was our responsibility to educate, to have opportunity for dialogue and discussion. And quite frankly, if anyone wants to really kind of take this journey, you really have to be committed and say, this is something I want to do. And we wanted to provide materials for them to do that. And so again, I look at it, as we were trying to be the healers of our community and to provide a platform to do that. And without proximity, and it goes to the book that Brian Stevens wrote. He talks about in that book the idea of proximity. You can't heal or help a situation without being close to it. And so this is our way of being close to it. And this is our way of providing resources to our community in order to bring about some healing that's desperately needed within our country.
Yeah. So as you look ahead, are there other opportunities on the horizon for people to engage in with the 846 series?
Absolutely. I mean, we still have some of our funding left over. And so the group, we're going to be meeting again to look at what else we want to offer as additional opportunities. Some of it could be a repeat of things we've done. And we'll look at some of the feedback that we got from the surveys to see what else we may want to offer. But again, it's to offer opportunity for dialogue around the issue of racial healing and reconciliation. And you can't have reconciliation without truth. And so we want this to be an opportunity to bring some truth out.
Yeah, I love that. And that quote by Brian Stevenson is one of my favorites about getting proximate, right?
Yeah,
like that.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's where
I mean, Christ was the greatest example of that. He was, as a lot of the kids say today, he was out in them streets. I mean, he was out, he wasn't sitting up in the office. He wasn't in the synagogue. I mean, he was in the synagogues at times, but he was out amongst the people, and so in order for us to really have an impact, we have to be out amongst the people and providing some solutions.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Rhonda, thank you for your time today. We're going to get the little time clock hitting us. So I would love to continue to ask you more questions, but thank you. I wrote a good number of notes and continue to be inspired by your obedience and your faithfulness to prayer. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you all for the team for inviting me. I pray that this was a blessing to someone.